The sound of custom-tailored silk tearing apart is a noise that etches into memory. It sounds like a desperate scream. When my daughter-in-law tried to stand up for her first dance, the Drake Hotel ballroom plunged into silence. She was completely frozen, anchored to her oak chair. I watched the blood drain from her face as realization hit her. 200 elite socialites stared at her. Everyone whispered behind champagne flutes, but I didn't care about her humiliation. My eyes were fixed on my son Brandon. I sat back, waiting for him to comprehend that the vicious trap set for his crippled mother had snapped shut on his own wife instead. I felt no pity or guilt. I took a sip of Cabernet and checked my wristwatch. To understand why I sat like a stone statue, while she suffered public humiliation, you have to understand what transpired 3 hours earlier in the shadows of that room. This horrifying disaster wasn't some random, unpredictable freak accident. It was a calculated, cold-blooded act of total war against my family. The ballroom was shrouded in darkness when I walked in that afternoon. I arrive early. It is a habit forged from 40 grueling years as a commercial contractor. You inspect the job site. I wanted to ensure the floral arrangements were perfect for my wife, Patricia. She adores white hydrangeas, and I spent a fortune ensuring the room looked like a royal garden for her son's wedding. As I moved quietly near the side entrance, staying off the main floor so my shoes wouldn't echo, I heard a sound that didn't belong in an empty ballroom. It was a giggle. It wasn't the nervous giggle of a bride. It was a cruel sound that set off every alarm bell in my head. I stopped dead in my tracks, concealing myself behind a velvet curtain near the head table. What I saw made my blood run cold. Hovering over the parents' table were my son, Brandon, and his bride-to-be, Brittany. They weren't sharing a romantic moment. They were working. Brittany was hunched over Patricia's assigned chair, positioned to the right of the groom. In Brittany's hand was a bright orange tube. I recognized it instantly from construction sites. It was Gorilla Glue, the heavy-duty gel kind that chemically fuses surfaces into one solid object. She was squeezing a generous spiral of clear gel directly onto the plush velvet cushion. She wasn't just putting a tiny dab, she was meticulously painting the entire surface. Brandon stood right next to her, acting as a lookout. He wasn't horrified. He was smiling. "Make sure you get the edges, babe," he whispered. The acoustics in the vast hall carried his voice straight to my ears. "I want her stuck good. She needs to learn her place." Brittany capped the tube with a sharp click and wiped her hands on a linen napkin. She admired her handiwork with twisted pride. "This is going to be absolutely hilarious," she said, her voice dripping with malice. "When the old hag tries to stand up for the toasts, she's going to be flopping around like a dying fish. Maybe she will finally break that other hip, and we can put her in a nursing home sooner." They actually laughed together, my own son. The boy whose private school tuition I paid by working double shifts in freezing winters lolled at the prospect of his gentle mother shattering her fragile bones. I felt a massive blow to my chest, my fists clenched so tightly my knuckles ached. The urge to step out and physically flatten him was overwhelming. I spent my adult life lifting lumber and pouring cement. I could have snapped him in half, but I didn't move. I forced my breathing to become shallow and measured. If I confronted them now, they would deny it. They would claim it was a silly joke, play the victims, and the wedding would proceed. And worse, Patricia would remain vulnerable to their calculating attacks. You don't win a major war by charging blindly. You win by flanking the enemy and letting them destroy themselves. I waited silently in the dark until they scurried out the side door, giggling like delinquent school children. When the door clicked shut, I stepped out of the shadows. I walked slowly to the head table, my heart pounding a rhythm of pure rage. I looked down at the chair. The adhesive gel was transparent, resting perfectly on the dark blue velvet. In the dim romantic lighting, it was completely invisible. If you didn't know it was there, you would sit right in it. I touched the outer edge of the cushion. It was incredibly tacky. It was beginning to set, but it would remain dangerous for another hour. I looked at the elegant place card, sitting in front of the poisoned chair. Mother of the groom. Patricia. My mind flashed back to 3 grueling months ago, the sterile hospital room. Patricia lying there, looking pale and small in that mechanical bed. The orthopedic surgeon had been very clear. He looked me dead in the eye and then looked directly at Brandon. "Mr. Miller," the doctor said, his tone grave. "The surgery was successful, but recovery is extremely critical. Her new hip socket is very fragile. Any sudden, jerking motion or physical strain could dislocate the joint entirely. If that happens at her age, the damage could be permanent. She might never walk again." Brandon had nodded solemnly. He heard every word. Brittany had been standing right there, mindlessly scrolling on her phone, but she heard it. They knew the stakes. This wasn't a harmless prank, this was premeditated assault. If Patricia sat in this pool of industrial glue and forcefully tried to stand up, the sudden resistance would jerk her frail body. Panic would cause her to twist abruptly. It could literally snap her healing hip like a dry twig. They weren't just trying to embarrass her. They were actively willing to put my beautiful wife in a wheelchair for the rest of her natural life, just to get her out of their way. They were willing to destroy her entirely, just to speed up getting their greedy hands on our assets, our estate, our investments, and our hard-earned money. They wanted everything we had spent a lifetime building, and they wanted it right now, without having to wait a single day longer for it. I stared at the poisoned chair, mind racing. The oak chair rented for the head table weighed 40 pounds. I couldn't swap it. Dragging it would create a grating sound and alert catering staff. The chairs were spaced precisely. Moving furniture was too risky. It would draw attention and ruin my plan. I looked at the puddle of transparent glue, a perfect circle of hate. I shifted my gaze to Brittany's assigned chair next to it. It was pristine, the velvet untouched, waiting for the arrogant bride. The hall was empty, but I heard clattering silverware from the kitchen. Staff would emerge soon to set glasses and light candles. I had 30 seconds. With steady hands, I picked up the Patricia place card. I wasn't nervous. With cold precision, I placed her card exactly in the center of the clean chair. I picked up the bride card and placed it gently in front of the glued chair. I checked alignment. Oak chairs were identical. The table settings, glasses, cutlery all identical. The only difference was the name and the invisible trap waiting on the velvet seat. Kitchen doors burst open. A waiter carrying a water pitcher walked in, stopping dead upon seeing me at the head table. "Sir," he asked, suspicious, "the guests aren't supposed to be in here yet. The room isn't ready." I didn't flinch. I turned with a calm, proud smile of a father, not a man rearming a trap. "I know, son," I said, smoothing a wrinkle near the glued chair, careful not to touch the seat. I just wanted to make sure everything was perfect for my wife. She just had hip surgery and has trouble walking. I wanted to check the spacing so she has room. His face softened, suspicion replaced by a respectful nod. "That is very thoughtful of you, sir. It looks beautiful." "Yes," I said, eyes drifting to the glue slowly drying into a permanent bond strong enough to hold a truck. "It is perfect." I walked out of the grand ballroom, passing the waiter, and went to the hotel's bar. I ordered a double scotch, neat. I needed something strong for the adrenaline. I threw it back in one swallow. The alcohol burned, but not as hot as the anger roaring in my gut. I pulled my smartphone from my tuxedo pocket, an unread text from my assistant Sarah. "Checks for the wedding vendors are ready to be mailed out tomorrow morning, as instructed. And the deed transfer paperwork for the penthouse is on your desk for Monday. Everything is set." I stared blankly at the screen. I had meticulously planned to give them the world. I paid for this lavish circus out of pocket, thousands of imported flowers, gourmet food, expensive venue, her custom dress. I was going to hand them keys to a $2 million penthouse as a wedding gift. I was going to retire, take Patricia to Italy, and leave the business in Brandon's hands. I typed a reply. My thumb hit the keys with deliberate force. "Hold everything. Do not mail a single check. Do not file the deed. Freeze the joint accounts. Wait for my call." I slipped the phone away. Affluent guests were arriving, perfumes filling the lobby. Through the crowd, I saw Patricia coming through the revolving doors. Leaning heavily on her cane, moving slowly but smiling radiantly. She looked beautiful in her tailored blue dress, finding something elegant but comfortable for her healing hip. She genuinely believed she was gaining a loving daughter today. I walked over, offering my arm. "Ready, my love?" I asked gently. She squeezed my hand. Her physical grip was weak, but her eyes were bright. "I am just so proud of him, George," she whispered, leaning into my shoulder. "And Brittany looked so incredibly beautiful at the rehearsal dinner last night. I really think we are finally going to be a real family." I forcefully swallowed the lump in my throat. I hated seeing her so naive in a world plotting her downfall. "Yes, Patricia," I said, leading her toward the ballroom, feeling like I was guiding a lamb to a slaughterhouse. "We are definitely going to find out exactly what kind of family we are tonight." I led her into the bustling ballroom. Chandeliers were dimmed for a dramatic entrance. A string quartet played softly. I guided her toward the elevated head table. I watched anxiously as she scanned the settings. "Oh, there I am," she said, pointing directly to the clean, safe chair. I held my breath. If Brittany or Brandon noticed the switch before sitting, my plan was ruined. If they saw cards moved, they would know someone was onto them. We reached the table. Across the room, Brittany and Brandon were making their theatrical entrance, eagerly soaking up applause. Waving, blowing exaggerated kisses, Brittany looked triumphant, owning the building in her massive, custom-made gown of lace and silk, heavy train dragging. We sat down. I watched like a hawk as Patricia lowered herself incredibly slowly into the clean chair. I helped her adjust her cane against the table leg. "Comfortable?" I asked, scanning for pain. "Perfect," she said, letting out a soft sigh of relief. I looked at the empty chair next to us. The trap, the glue chair. The place card standing proudly in front of it said, "The Bride." The married couple approached, basking in the spotlight. Brandon looked at me, then at his mother. His eyes darted to the chair she was actually sitting in. He frowned slightly, confusion washing over his face. He remembered applying adhesive to the chair on the immediate right, but his mother was further down. He looked at the chair next to her. Brittany arrived in a flurry of silk and perfume. She didn't bother to look at name cards. She was way too busy looking at the audience, aggressively blowing kisses to giggling bridesmaids. High on adrenaline and narcissism, she saw the empty chair directly next to the groom's spot. She assumed it was hers, the absolute center of attention. She confidently grabbed the back of the glued chair. Brandon opened his mouth to say something. I saw sudden realization and panic in his eyes. He realized something was fundamentally wrong with the seating geometry. Before he could speak, the DJ's voice boomed over the speakers. "Ladies and gentlemen, please take your seats for the dinner service." Brittany didn't wait. She grabbed her heavy train of incredibly expensive fabric, threw it carelessly over the back of the chair, and she sat down. She sat down hard. She wiggled to get comfortable, pressing her hips into the velvet cushion to settle her dress. Brandon froze, his eyes wide with terror. I calmly raised my champagne glass in a silent toast. I stared him dead in the eye with the calculation of an executioner. The trap was set. Now we waited for the adhesive to cure. Dinner was about to be served, and it was going to be the bitterest meal my son had ever eaten. The ballroom air was thick with perfume. We looked like picture-perfect parents. I focused on the room's center. Brittany glowed, but her eyes were cold. Hugging guests, she scanned over their shoulders for someone more important. Patricia squeezed my arm. "Look at them, George," she whispered. "They look like royalty. I am happy we gave this night to them." I didn't tell her that the royalty she admired were her executioners. I watched as Brittany grabbed the layers of her gown. The dress was layers of tulle, lace, and silk cascading like a waterfall. It was the dress every girl dreams of wearing, but unfortunately for her, it was the perfect camouflage for what was happening beneath. Fluffing the back of her dress to fan it out, she inadvertently ensured maximum surface area contacted the adhesive. She lowered herself with the grace of a swan, letting her weight sink into the cushion. I sat sipping water, imagining the chemical reaction underneath those layers. Her body's pressure forcefully pushed the glue into the dress fibers. The gel grabbed the lace, silk, and tulle, bonding tightly with the chair cushion. It created a bond stronger than the fabric itself. Brittany didn't feel a single thing. That is the hidden danger of that glue. It is room temperature. It doesn't chemically burn. It doesn't feel wet or cold through thick layers of winter clothing or bridal gowns. It silently becomes one object with whatever touches it. She wiggled more, grabbing her champagne flute. Good, wiggling helped spread the adhesive. She leaned back, crossing her legs. Perfect. That shifted her body weight again and pressed the fabric more firmly into the trap. She was locking herself in, building her own prison. I sat down on the other side of Patricia. I reached for the bottle of Cabernet Sauvignon in the center of the table. It was a 2015, vintage expensive, full-bodied and rich. I poured a generous glass, watching the dark liquid swirl. I took a slow sip. It tasted exactly like justice. I looked over the rim of my glass at the happy couple. Brandon was nervously pouring more champagne, forcing a hollow laugh at something Brittany had whispered. Brittany was reapplying her lip gloss, using her front-facing phone camera as a mirror. She was completely oblivious. She was sitting directly on a ticking time bomb, checking her teeth for lipstick. I felt a strange sense of detachment. Usually, on a hectic construction site, when something goes critically wrong, there is instant panic, there is frantic shouting and running. But this was entirely different. This was a highly controlled demolition. The explosive charges were precisely set. The area was cleared of innocent bystanders. Patricia was completely safe, and the building was already coming down. Gravity just hadn't caught up with it. Yet, the waiters silently circulated with hot appetizers. Lobster bisque. I ate incredibly slowly. I enjoyed every spoonful. I watched Brittany eat. She was highly animated, bouncing slightly in her seat as she talked to the maid of honor. Every bounce, every minor shift of her weight was rapidly curing the glue. The natural heat radiating from her body was accelerating the intense chemical bonding process. By the time the salad course finally arrived, her expensive dress wasn't just resting on the chair. It was fundamentally part of the chair. She was no longer wearing a dress. She was wearing furniture. I smoothly checked my watch again. The speeches were scheduled for 8 p.m. The anticipated first dance was at 8:30, 45 minutes. That was exactly how long she had left of her dignity. I poured another glass of wine and settled back in my seat. I am very patient. I have waited years for city permits to clear and long months for concrete foundations to cure. I could easily wait 45 minutes to watch her world completely burn. The waiter cleared appetizer plates with the efficiency of a ghost. I watched his hands move. I watched everything. My senses were heightened, dialed up to a dangerous frequency that picked up every single microaggression at the table. For the next hour, as the heavy main course was served, I sat in the middle of a battlefield, cleverly disguised as a celebration. The filet mignon arrived, searing hot and smelling strongly of fresh rosemary and roasted garlic. It was a beautiful, thick cut of meat. I had selected the menu myself. I had paid $75 a plate for this meal out of my pocket. And as I slowly cut into the tender beef, I realized with sickening clarity that I was paying for the privilege of watching my son and his new wife dissect my wife's self-esteem. Brittany didn't pick up her silver fork immediately. She was way too busy scrutinizing Patricia's plate. My wife had innocently reached for a dinner roll, just a small piece of bread. She loved the crusty sourdough the hotel baked fresh. Her frail hand was trembling slightly as she reached for the silver butter knife. Brittany leaned in abruptly. Her voice was low, falsely confidential, adopting the condescending tone a frustrated nurse might use with a slow, disobedient child. "Mom," she said, tilting her head with fake concern. "Are you absolutely sure about that bread?" Patricia froze instantly. Her hand hovered uselessly over the buttered dish. She looked at Brittany with wide, uncertain, terrified eyes. I thought I would have a small piece," Patricia whispered. Brittany sighed loudly. It was a long, performative exhale that clearly signaled deep, burdensome concern to anyone watching. She reached out and touched Patricia's wrist, forcefully stopping her. "I am just really thinking about your recovery," Brittany said, her eyes wide and mockingly innocent. You know, every extra pound is unnecessary pressure on that artificial hip. The doctor specifically said, you need to stay light. Carbs are just heavy inflammation waiting to happen. We really don't want you collapsing under your own weight and ruining the night, do we? She smiled. It was a terrifying smile that didn't reach her cold eyes. It was a shark proudly baring its teeth before a strike. Patricia pulled her hand back as if the bread burned her. She put the roll back on her plate. She looked down at her lap, a shame coloring her cheeks. You are right, Patricia murmured, her voice breaking. I shouldn't. Thank you for looking out for me, dear. I saw Brandon nod in agreement. He was stuffing his face with steak, chewing loudly, but he nodded. Yeah, Mom, listen to Brittany, he said around a mouthful of meat. She knows everything about nutrition. You really don't want to end up back in the hospital. We have big plans this summer. We can't be babysitting you if you blow out your other hip-eating bread. I felt the handle of my steak knife pressing into my palm. I gripped it so hard, my knuckles turned white. They weren't actually concerned about her health. They were disgusted by her weakness. They viewed her as a liability, a broken object that needed to be managed. I placed my knife and fork down on the plate. I wiped my mouth slowly with the napkin. I didn't look at Brandon. I didn't look at Brittany. I reached silently into my pocket and pulled out my smartphone. I kept it hidden under the table. I didn't even need to look at the screen to know exactly what I was doing. I knew the direct number for the bank's fraud line by heart. I also knew the private cell number for my personal banker, Michael, who was currently on speed dial. I quickly opened the text thread with Michael. Override the wire transfer for the Maldives honeymoon package. I typed. Cancel the first-class flights, cancel the bungalow, full refund only. If it is not refundable, cancel it anyway. Burn it, I hit send. I took a sip of my wine, the message showed as delivered. Somewhere deep in a banking system, $25,000 just vanished permanently from their future. Brittany was still talking loudly. She had moved on from policing the bread to complaining about the apartment. She was cutting her steak into tiny pieces, ignorant of the fact that the industrial glue beneath her was hardening into a permanent bond with her dress. So, Dad, she said, turning her attention to me. She called me Dad. It sounded exactly like a dirty slur. We really need to talk about the timeline for the penthouse. She was talking about the lavish wedding gift, the 5-bedroom luxury penthouse in the Gold Coast district. The one I had bought and renovated with my own hands 3 years ago, intending it to be my retirement home before foolishly deciding to gift it to them. What about it? I asked, keeping my voice calm and flat. Well, Brandon and I were looking closely at this yesterday, she said, waving her fork dismissively. And the interior is it is a little dated, it feels very heavy. All that dark Brazilian wood and the marble. It feels exactly like an old man's club. Brandon chimed in, eager to please his new master. Yeah, Dad, it is a bit depressing. We want to completely gut the main living room, open it up. And the master bath? The jacuzzi tub has to go. It is highly unsanitary. We want a wet room, minimalist poured white concrete. I stared at him in disbelief. I had laid that expensive marble tile myself on my hands and knees. I had imported that flawless wood directly from Brazil. It was master craftsmanship. It was timeless. And they recklessly wanted to rip it all out and replace it with cheap concrete that would inevitably crack in 5 years. We got a quote from a contractor, Brittany continued, taking a sip of champagne. It is going to be about $60,000 for the demo and the remodel. Since the deed is transferring on Monday, we were really hoping you could just front us the renovation costs right now, so we can start the noisy work while we are on our honeymoon in the Maldives. We don't want to move into a dusty construction zone. She smiled expectantly. She wasn't politely asking. She was aggressively demanding. She assumed my hard-earned money was an infinite tap that she could turn on whenever she pleased. I looked at Patricia. She was sadly pushing her peas around her plate, afraid to eat them in case Brittany sharply criticized her calorie intake again. She looked so small. She looked so tired. I looked back at Brittany. She shifted aggressively in her seat. I saw the thick fabric of her dress pulled dangerously tight against the chair leg. The glue was doing its job perfectly. She was heavily anchored. She just didn't know it yet. I picked up my phone again. 60,000, I repeated dryly. To fix a brand new $2 million apartment. Brittany rolled her eyes playfully. It is not fixing, Dad. It is curating. We need the space to reflect our brand. We are going to be hosting VIPs. We need it to be highly Instagrammable. The current look is just dusty. So dusty, my life's work was dusty. I unlocked my phone. I opened the text thread with Sarah. Do not file the deed transfer on Monday. I typed, contact the realtor immediately. Put the penthouse back on the market this weekend. Listed as fully furnished, immediate occupancy. Have the security team change the locks tonight. I hit send. That was a $2 million text message. I looked up at them with a blank expression. I will see what I can do. I lied smoothly. Brittany loudly clapped her hands together. Oh my gosh, thank you, that is amazing. You are the absolute best. She turned to Brandon and kissed him on the cheek. See, I told you he would do it. We just have to push him a little. She whispered it. But I heard it. I hear absolutely everything. The tense dinner continued. The waiters silently cleared the plates. Dessert was coming, the wedding cake, a 5-tier tower of imported vanilla that cost more than my first truck. Brittany leaned toward Patricia again, the hungry shark circling back for another bite. Mom, you are not really going to have cake, are you? She asked loudly. Patricia looked up, clearly startled. I thought just a small slice. Brittany aggressively shook her head. Sugar is terrible for inflammation, really, Mom. I am telling you this because I love you. You look swollen. I really think you should stick to tap water, maybe hot water with lemon. It will help flush. She assumed a thread caught the armrest. Letting go of Brandon, she pulled her silk away from the wood. Unyielding resistance, it wasn't a snag. The Gorilla Glue cured into resin, it soaked through tulle. Delicate silk, the dress lining, her Spanx, and the velvet cushion. Brittany and the heavy oak chair were one continuous entity. She froze, panic bled into her perfectly contoured expression. She looked at her lap. Her massive designer skirt covered the crime scene perfectly. She tried to slide forward, then awkwardly twist. She couldn't. Brandon stood holding his hand out, his bright smile wavering. Babe, come on, he hissed through clenched teeth. Everyone is watching us. Get up, I can't. She whispered frantically. What do you mean you can't? Stop being dramatic, just stand up, I am trying. She snapped. I am stuck, the dress is caught on something. She was permanently welded. I knew the exact physics. To stand, she had to lift her body weight, plus a solid oak chair clamped to her backside. That chair weighed at least 40 pounds. With awkward leverage, she couldn't get her center of gravity right. Every time she stood, the heavy chair tipped violently forward, forcing her back onto the seat. She gave a sudden jerk, throwing her upper body forward to use momentum. The massive chair lifted 2 inches. I saw the wooden legs hover before dead weight aggressively dragged her back down. Thud, the chair hit the floor loudly. Brittany gasped, looking at Brandon with pure terror. This felt like a demonic hand grabbing her from hell. Brandon, help me, she pleaded loudly. I am really stuck. I think there is something on the chair. Brandon dramatically rolled his eyes, looking nervously at VIP guests. The polite applause died completely. People whispered rapidly. The spotlight was blindingly hot. Jesus! Brittany! Brandon muttered angrily. He stepped close, grabbing her arm, deeply embarrassed. He gets incredibly mean. I am going to pull you, on the count of 3. Stand the hell up. No! Wait! She screamed. He aggressively braced his foot against the table leg, gripping her forearm tightly. He looked like he was pulling a stubborn weed. 1, 2, 3! He yanked her with brutal force. Brittany screamed a sharp yelp of pain. The sheer force lifted her body, but the massive chair came right with her. It rose 6 inches, dangling heavily from her dress like a bizarre wooden tail. The glue held fast. The bond was stronger than gravity itself. For a terrifying second, she hovered under the spotlight, suspended in a bizarre crouch, the chair hanging off her. She looked utterly ridiculous, like a grotesque puppet. Gravity finally won. She crashed back onto the seat. The heavy impact rattled the expensive silverware. The DJ's music pounded, but between us at the head table, the air was dead static. Brandon stared at her dress and the chair. "What the hell is wrong with you?" he demanded furiously. Brittany was fully hyperventilating. She frantically clawed the thick fabric around her hips, manicured nails scraping uselessly against tulle. "I don't know," she cried, tears ruining her makeup. "It won't let go. It feels like glue." She said the word glue. She immediately looked up. Her panicked eyes met mine. I sat perfectly calmly, hands folded neatly. I hadn't moved a single muscle. I looked directly at her, then deliberately let my gaze drift to the completely empty chair right next to her. The chair with clean velvet, where Patricia currently sat comfortably, sipping water. Then I looked back at Brittany. I allowed the corner of my mouth to lift a fraction of a millimeter. A cold smirk, the horrifying realization hit her like a physical blow. Her eyes went wide, her mouth opened in pure shock. She remembered the bright orange tube, the thick spiral of gel, the cruel prank. She rapidly looked at the place card in front of her. The bride. She looked at the place card in front of Patricia, mother of the groom. The physical chairs were fundamentally wrong. She knew it instantly. In that split second, she knew everything. She knew I had seen them, swapped the cards, and that she sat squarely in her own malicious trap. There was absolutely no way out. Sensing the awkward delay, the MC quickly filled the dead air. "Looks like the beautiful bride is just too comfortable to leave the table. Let's give them some encouragement, folks." The wealthy crowd cheered, hesitantly. The spotlight intensified. Brandon, completely unaware of the silent communication passing between me and his wife, decided to take forceful measures. He wasn't going to let his perfect moment be ruined. "Stand up!" he growled. He aggressively moved behind her, grabbing her firmly under the armpits. He was going to physically lift her. Brittany tried desperately to stop him. "No! Brandon, don't! The dress, it's stuck to the..." He didn't listen. He violently heaved upward with all his physical strength. That is when the sound happened. It wasn't a simple rip or a seam popping. It was a jagged, tearing screech cutting right through the heavy bass of the pop music, like a gunshot. It sounded exactly like a heavy sail being shredded in a hurricane. The terrifying sound seemed to go on for 5 full seconds. It started at the base of her spine and tore violently downward, branching out left and right. The Italian silk screamed in loud protest as it was forced to choose between the woman and the wood. It chose the wood. Brittany shot aggressively, up to a standing position, violently propelled by the sudden release of tension. She stumbled forward, crashing heavily into Brandon's chest. But the entire back of her dress didn't go with her. I sat there, sipping my water, looking at the heavy oak chair. It was a masterpiece of destruction. Adhered perfectly flat to the velvet seat was the entire rear panel of her wedding gown. The layers of tulle, hand-stitched lace, and silk lining were all there, permanently fused to the velvet cushion by the orange adhesive she had applied herself. It looked like a violently shed skin. It was a perfect, horrifying mold of exactly where she had been sitting. And then I looked at Brittany. She stood frozen in the absolute center of the blazing spotlight. The front of her dress was partially intact, hanging off her frame like a ragged bib. But the back was entirely gone. The cruel spotlight illuminated the harsh reality lying beneath the fantasy. Brittany wasn't wearing sexy bridal lingerie. She was wearing Brittany's scream shattered the crystal flutes on our table. It was the sound of her reality breaking into jagged shards. The ballroom froze in collective shock. Then the silence shattered, replaced by digital hunger. I sat perfectly still and watched as the elite guests reacted on pure instinct. They did not rush to cover the bride's exposed backside. They did not avert their eyes. Instead, smartphones emerged, flashlights flared, recording lights blinked red. I watched Mrs. Vanderwallet hold her phone high to secure a better angle of the ruined silk. Brittany's humiliation was broadcast in real time. Brittany spun wildly, attempting to shield herself. But every turn exposed her. She was hyperventilating, clawing at the empty air. The dress was permanently destroyed. The back panel remained glued to her chair, fused to the velvet. Suddenly, the blind panic in her eyes vanished, calcifying into something sharp. She stared at the empty chair. She saw the industrial adhesive. She saw the place card that still read the bride. Her head snapped toward Patricia. My wife sat frozen, her frail hand covering her mouth, her eyes wide with confusion. Patricia had absolutely no idea what had occurred. She knew nothing about the glue or the swap place cards. She only saw her daughter-in-law, standing half-naked and screeching. Brittany lunged. She threw herself across the table, knocking over the floral centerpiece. Water spilled across the linen. "You!" Brittany shrieked, pointing at Patricia. "You senile old witch! You did this!" Patricia recoiled into her chair. "Brittany, I don't understand," she stammered. "Don't lie to me." Brittany screamed. "You swapped the cards. You knew I put the glue there. You wanted to ruin me!" The accusation echoed across the room. In her narcissistic rage, Brittany had confessed. She yelled that she had planted the glue, but the crowd was too busy recording to process it. They'd just heard a bride screaming at a crippled woman. Brittany reached out, her fingers hooked into claws, aiming to grab Patricia's shoulders. Before she made contact, a blur of motion caught my eye. It was Brandon. For one heartbeat, I genuinely believed my son was stepping in to stop his wife from assaulting his mother. I thought he would restrain Brittany and apologize. I was dead wrong. Brandon grabbed Brittany's waist to steady her. He scanned the ruined dress, the laughing guests, and the glowing phones. Then, he turned his rage on the easiest target. He turned on his mother. "Mom!" He bellowed. "What the hell is wrong with you?" Patricia flinched. "Brandon?" She whispered. "Are you crazy?" Brandon shouted. "Look at what you did. You ruined the wedding. Why can't you just be normal? Why do you always have to make everything about you?" He was rewriting reality to fit his narrative. In his warped mind, Patricia's survival was an act of aggression. Her refusal to sit in the deadly trap was a personal attack on his wife. Brittany, realizing she had an ally, intensified her assault. "She tried to kill me, Brandon. She knew the glue was there. She wanted me to sit in it. Look at my dress. It cost $15,000. She shook a piece of shredded silk at Patricia. "You are going to pay for this. I am going to sue you. I am going to take every penny you have." Patricia began to sob. She looked at Brandon, desperately searching for the son she had raised. Instead, she found a furious stranger in a tuxedo, concerned only with his damaged reputation. "I didn't do anything," Patricia cried. "I just sat where the card was. Liar!" Brandon yelled, "You always pull this victim act. You did this on purpose to humiliate Brittany because you are jealous. You are jealous that she is young and beautiful, and you are just old." The cruelty of his words hit like a physical blow. I watched my son burn the final bridge to his family. He was actively participating in the abuse. He chose the predator over the prey. The crowd began to murmur. Some guests lowered their phones, but the vultures kept recording. Brittany wiped her nose, smearing her makeup. "Get out!" She screamed. "Get out of my wedding. I don't want to see your ugly face." Brandon pointed toward the exit. "You heard her. Mom, leave. You are not welcome here. Go take your cane and your jealousy and get out." Patricia gripped her armrests and tried to stand. She was shaking violently. She looked at me, pleading silently for an explanation, for protection, for an end to the nightmare. I did not say a word. I did not engage in their screaming match. That was exactly what they wanted. They wanted a chaotic fight to cover their guilt. I simply stood up and buttoned my jacket. I walked slowly around the table until I stood behind Patricia's chair. I placed a heavy hand on her shoulder, feeling the tremors running through her body. I met Brandon's eyes with the absolute cold indifference of a stranger. Then I raised my free hand and snapped a sharp signal to the back of the ballroom. Mr. Henderson, the hotel manager I had tipped $500 earlier, nodded and spoke rapidly into his headset. Instantly, the house lights blazed to full capacity. The romantic mood lighting vanished, replaced by the harsh glare of the cleaning lights. The music was cut off abruptly mid-chorus. The room fell completely silent. I turned back to Brandon, keeping my voice calm, level, and loud enough to echo to the back row. "She isn't going anywhere, Brandon. But you might want to call your lawyer, because I think the police are going to have some serious questions about that orange tube in your jacket pocket." I watched the room absorb the shock. Everything I had suffered, every silent night watching Patricia cry, every dollar they had stolen from us, culminated here. I had spent months orchestrating this flawless execution. They thought they could manipulate a disabled old woman and a grieving father. They thought they could steal our dignity and our savings. But they underestimated me. I knew the adhesive was industrial strength because I had swapped it myself. I knew they would blame Patricia because that is who they are. They are cowards. They are narcissists. They are monsters. Monsters do not deserve mercy. They deserve public execution. They deserve to lose everything they hold dear: their friends, their reputation, their freedom. The police were already on their way. The evidence was irrefutable. I had the cameras, the receipts, the witnesses. Silence fell over the ballroom like a construction site before a controlled explosion. I stood, deliberately not rushing. I placed my napkin on the table, aligning its edges precisely. Brandon still towered over his mother, his face twisted in misplaced righteousness. He raised his hand, not to strike her, but to force her out. His finger pointed near her nose as he took a breath, to scream another lie to cover his tracks. I closed the distance in 2 strides. I wrapped my hand around Brandon's wrist. I didn't squeeze. I just held it. My hands aren't soft. They are calloused from decades of handling rebar and pouring concrete. They built the roof over his head and paid for his private school. Now they were the hands of a stranger. Brandon froze. The iron grip short-circuited his rage. He looked at my hand, then at my face. For a moment he looked terrified, but fear was quickly replaced by annoyance. He tried to pull away. He couldn't. I was an anchor. "Dad, let go," he snapped, trying to maintain dignity. "This doesn't concern you. Mom is having a breakdown. I need to get her out of here before she ruins Brittany's night." I didn't let go. I tightened my grip, making him wince. I stepped closer, forcing him to look at me. I wanted him to see my disappointment and feel the weight of the bridge he was burning. "She isn't having a breakdown, Brandon," I said. My voice was calm and steady. It cut through the murmurs. "And she isn't going anywhere." Brandon scoffed nervously. "Dad, look at her. She swapped the cards. She admitted it. Brittany is humiliated." I looked past him to Brittany, who was clutching her ruined dress. Then I looked back at my son. "She didn't swap the cards," I said, letting my voice rise so everyone could hear. "And she didn't swap the seats. Your mother sat exactly where she was supposed to sit. She sat in the chair that was clean and safe." Brandon opened his mouth to spin more lies, but I cut him off. "You see, son, sometimes karma is instant. Your wife isn't sitting in glue because of a trick. She is sitting in it because that is the exact seat nature intended for someone with a soul that dirty." The crowd gasped. I had just called the bride a dirty soul at her own wedding, but I wasn't done. Brandon's face went pale. He tried to laugh it off. "That is insane, Dad. Glue?" "What glue? We don't know anything about glue." I smiled coldly. "Oh, you don't?" I asked. "Then explain to your investors, your friends, and the cameras live streaming this right now. What exactly is inside the left breast pocket of your tuxedo?" Brandon stopped breathing. He fought the urge to check his pocket. He knew. He knew that in the frantic rush to the reception, he had shoved the Gorilla Glue into his pocket and forgotten to throw it away. "Check it, Brandon," I commanded. "Show everyone the souvenir you kept from your little art project." He didn't move. He stood paralyzed by the realization that I knew absolutely everything. I had been watching. The father he thought was a senile bank account was 3 steps ahead. I let go of his wrist. He stumbled back, rubbing his arm. "I don't have to show you anything," he stammered, his voice cracking. "This is harassment. You don't have to." I agreed, but the cap is sticking out. Every eye followed my gaze. Against his black lapel, a bright orange cap was clearly visible. The undeniable smoking gun. Brittany saw it too. She let out a strangled sound. She realized her accomplice had been carrying the murder weapon all night. I turned to the crowd, addressing the room with absolute authority. "My wife, Patricia, is recovering from major hip surgery," I announced. If she had sat in that chair, if she had been stuck and tried to stand, her hip would have shattered. She would be in an ambulance. That is what my son and his new wife maliciously planned. I looked at Brandon one last time. "You wanted a memorable wedding." I said, "Congratulations. You got one. If you will excuse us, I think we have some videos to watch." Brandon quickly buttoned his jacket, fumbling to hide the orange cap. It was too late. The image was permanently burned into the retinas of every person in the room. He looked around wildly, scanning for anyone who would buy his lie. There were only cameras, judgmental stares, and the cold silence of a jury reaching a verdict. He turned back to me, his face twisting into defensive rage. He decided to double down. If he yelled loud enough, he could drown out the truth. "This is a setup," he screamed. "You planted this. You put this in my pocket when I hugged you earlier." He pointed a trembling finger at me. "My father is sick," he shouted to the guests. "He has dementia. He is paranoid. He has been trying to sabotage my relationship with Brittany for months. He made this whole thing up." I watched him with pity and disgust. It is terrible to watch your child disintegrate and realize the boy you raised has grown into a coward. He was willing to label me mentally incompetent to save his skin. He turned aggressively to his best man, Jason, who looked like he desperately wanted to dissolve into the floorboards. "Jason, you are a witness," Brandon yelled. "He is slandering me. I want a restraining order. This is defamation." He looked at me. "I am going to sue you for everything you have, Dad. I am going to have you declared legally incompetent and put you in a home. You are done." The threat hung in the air. It was the final betrayal. He was predatory, threatening to use the legal system to lock me away so he could loot my estate. I didn't flinch. I reached into my pocket and pulled out a small laser pointer. I keep it for site inspections, but tonight it was a conductor's baton. "You can try to sue me, Brandon," I said calmly, projecting easily to the back of the room. "But in a court of law, you need evidence. And unfortunately for you, I brought my own." I confidently pressed the button on the laser pointer and aimed a bright red dot directly at the projection booth, high above the ballroom floor. "Roll it, Mr. Henderson," I said. The massive screen behind the stage, which had been black since I cut the romantic slideshow feed, immediately flickered to life. The guests turned their heads in unison. Even Brittany, who was still shivering violently in her ruined dress, looked up. The image that appeared wasn't a professional wedding video. It was raw, high-definition security footage. It was grainy, shot from a high angle, but the clarity was undeniable. It was black and white, but the horrifying truth it told was colorful enough. The digital timestamp in the corner read 5:45 p.m. 2 hours ago. The entire room watched in breathless silence as two figures walked into the empty frame. Even from the back, they were completely unmistakable. The massive tulle skirt, the fitted tuxedo. It was Brandon and Brittany. Brittany reached into Brandon's pocket, pulling out the glue. The room gasped. Brittany uncapped the glue, squeezed it onto Patricia's chair, and painted it. Audio played. "Make sure you get the edges, babe," Brandon's voice boomed. "I want her stuck good. She needs to learn her place." Brittany's voice followed. "When the old hag tries to stand up for the toast, she's going to be flopping around like a fish. Maybe she will finally break that other hip." The crowd erupted in revulsion. They high-fived, kissed, and switched place cards. Lights came up. Heavy silence. The guests looked disgusted. Frank walked out. Mrs. Vanderwallet said, "Disgusting," and left. Leonard took notes. Brandon turned to me in panic. "Dad, wait!" He stammered. "It was a joke. A stupid prank. We weren't really going to hurt her. The video, it looks way worse than it is." "A prank?" I asked. "Breaking a 67-year-old woman's hip is a prank?" "I didn't mean it like that," he cried. "You know, Brandon, I spent my whole life building a legacy for you. But I realized tonight I poured the foundation on quicksand. You destroyed your own life in less than 3 minutes. I turned. The party is over. Go home. Mr. Henderson approached Brandon with a credit card terminal. Mr. Miller, Henderson said, I sincerely apologize, but we have a situation requiring your immediate attention. Not now, Henderson, put it on the tab. I will sign it later. I am afraid that is the problem. Sir, we attempted to run the final balance as per our contract. The transaction was completely declined. Impossible. It is a platinum card with no limit. Run it again. We ran it 3 times. Sir, Henderson said. The bank flagged the card as invalid. The associated account was frozen by the primary account holder. Brandon froze. Dad, he whispered. I didn't answer, Dad. He shouted. What did you do? The card isn't working. Tell him it is a mistake. It is not a mistake, Brandon. I canceled the supplementary card 10 minutes ago. I also removed your name from the joint checking account and the locked investment portfolio. You cut me off here, now? You wanted to be a big man, Brandon. You wanted to treat your mother like an inconvenience and your father like an ATM. Congratulations. Big men pay their own bills. How much is it? He asked Henderson for the remaining banquet balance, the open bar, staff overtime, and security surcharge. That comes to $42,000. Brandon breathed. However, Henderson continued, there are additional charges incurred in the last hour. Additional charges? Brandon squeaked. Yes, sir. The antique French velvet chair your wife is currently attached to. That piece is valued at $4,500. Since it was permanently altered with industrial adhesive, you have purchased it. Then there is the carpet cleaning fee, table linen damage, and the cancellation fee for the honeymoon suite, canceled by the primary cardholder this evening. The total outstanding balance due immediately is $81,450. Brandon looked at me pleadingly. Dad, please, he begged. I don't have $80,000. I have maybe $2,000. Please just pay it. I will pay you back, I swear. No, Brandon, you won't pay me back because you never have. You lived your entire life on a tab I paid. You thought that gave you the right to look down on the people who made that life possible? You tried to break her. You thought it would be funny to watch her suffer. I don't think this is funny, but it is absolutely fair. Babe, do you have any cards? Brandon asked Brittany. Me? You told me you were rich. You told me this was all taken care of. It was, Brandon yelled. He cut me off. He is crazy. He is not crazy. Brittany screamed. He is done with you. Who is going to pay for my dress? Who is going to pay for this chair stuck to my ass? She turned to me. George, please, you can't leave us like this. This is illegal. You have to pay. It is your wedding. I laughed. My wedding? No, darling. This is your show. I was just the producer, and the producer just pulled the funding. Henderson spoke up. Sir, if you cannot provide valid payment, I will have to involve the authorities. Theft of services is a felony. We have police officers in the lobby already. Brandon slumped. I can't pay, he whispered. Well, son, you have 2 options. Option 1, you go to the lobby. Let them put handcuffs on you and spend your wedding night in a holding cell, explaining to a judge why you ate a meal you couldn't afford. Option 2, you go into that kitchen, take off that tuxedo jacket, roll up your sleeves, and start washing dishes. Wash dishes? That is right. At the rate they pay dishwashers, if you work double shifts, you might pay off this debt in about 3 years. I turned to Brittany, and you, my dear, can eagerly help him, or you can try to sell that dress. I hear there is a niche market for wedding gowns with antique furniture attached. I would hurry. The interest on $80,000 adds up fast. I turned to Patricia. Come on, Patricia. Let's go get a slice of pizza. I suddenly have a craving for something cheap and honest. As we left, I heard Henderson, security, please escort Mr. Miller to the back office to discuss a payment plan, and bring the dish soap. We are going to be here a while. The sound of doors closing was the sweetest sound I had ever heard. The sound of a bouncing check I wasn't covering. Financial ruin was the appetizer. Brandon leaned against the table, defeated. I wasn't finished. Leonard West, my ruthless corporate attorney, stepped forward. He glided through the ballroom's silence. He stopped before Brittany, who frantically clutched her shredded dress, the chair still hanging from her backside. She glared. "Who are you?" she spat. "Another of George's goons." "Get away from me!" Leonard calmly pulled a white envelope from his jacket. "Mrs. Miller, I am Leonard West, counsel for George and Patricia Miller. You are served." He dropped the envelope to the floor. "What is this?" Brandon asked, his arrogance gone. "A formal complaint," Leonard said. "Count 1, malicious destruction of private property." An authentic French velvet chair, valued at $4,500. "It's just a chair," Brittany shrieked. "An antique," Leonard corrected. "By applying epoxy, you rendered it worthless. The hotel will press charges. Mr. Miller will provide video evidence." "That's just money," Brandon yelled. "I'll pay it back." "You can't sue us for a chair." "We aren't suing for the chair, Brandon." Count 2. Attempted aggravated battery and intentional infliction of severe emotional distress upon a vulnerable adult. The room went cold. "Battery? I didn't touch her." "You actively conspired to create a dangerous physical trap for Patricia," Leonard said. "You knew her hip replacement's fragility. The video captures your wife, hoping Patricia would break her other hip. That establishes malice and intent. This was a premeditated attempt to cause severe bodily harm." Brittany shook. "I didn't mean it. It was a joke, Mr. Miller. The restraining orders are filed," Leonard said, ignoring her. "Neither of you is permitted within 500 feet of you, Patricia, or any of your properties." "Our properties?" Brandon whispered. "The final item," I said, pulling out the master key to the penthouse. "You asked for money to renovate. Dad, please, our lease ended yesterday. We moved everything into the penthouse this morning." I made a tight fist. "Your occupancy ended 20 minutes ago. Your stuff is on the curb of State Street. I hired a private moving crew. It might rain, so hurry. You threw us out on our wedding night?" Brittany gasped. "I secured my property. The deed was never transferred. I don't rent to people who try to physically cripple my wife." Brandon fell to his knees, crying, "Dad, stop, please. I am your blood. Blood makes you biologically related. Loyalty and respect make you family. I spent 40 years building a fortune, thinking I'd hand it to you." I turned to Leonard. "The new will?" "Right here." Leonard nodded. I held the old will in front of Brandon. "This left everything to you. $15 million. I violently ripped it into confetti. Tomorrow, Leonard sets up the Miller Family Trust. Beneficiaries, Chicago Animal Welfare Society, and the Veterans Support Fund." Brandon's jaw dropped. "Giving my money to stray dogs." "My money," I roared. "I'd rather leave every cent to dogs. They don't bite the hand that feeds them." "The show is over," I told the crowd. "Go home. If anyone sees my son, give him a job application. He'll need it." I signaled to Patricia. "Ready, Mrs. Miller." She smiled. "Take me home, George." As we walked out, I witnessed the final collapse. The moment the $15 million completely evaporated, their love vanished. "You idiot!" Brittany hissed. "You told me he was a pushover." Brandon scrambled up. "This was your terrible idea. You cost me absolutely everything. $15 million, the penthouse, my entire life. Gone because you couldn't keep your mouth shut." "Don't blame me, you complete loser," she shrieked. "You're a massive fraud. You're just a pathetic daddy's boy. I married a dishwasher. That was the breaking point." Brandon lunged. "You gold digger. You're nothing but cheap trash wrapped in silk." He grabbed her bare shoulders and shook her violently. Brittany lost her balance and stumbled backward. "Get off me!" she screamed, her nails raking across his cheek, leaving bleeding lines. Brandon shoved her hard. Brittany fell, crashing into the massive 5-tier wedding cake. The imported vanilla and raspberry cream violently toppled, directly on top of them. White frosting exploded. Soft sponge splattered across Brittany's ruined dress. Brandon slipped in the sticky mess, falling onto his back. They lay there rolling in sugar and deep hatred, wrestling, screaming horrific insults. It was grotesque, pathetic, and the truest thing they had ever done together. Police officers walked over to the sticky pile of broken dreams. "Break it up," one shouted, aggressively grabbing Brandon. She assaulted me, Brandon yelled. Arrest her. The other officer helped Brittany up. He looked critically at the chair, securely attached to her rear end. Ma'am, you have to come with us. I can't. I am stuck to the furniture. We have a heavy saw in the van, he sighed, handcuffing her. Brandon was already securely cuffed, sobbing loudly. Dad, please don't let them take me. Patricia squeezed my arm. Let's go, George. I pushed open the double doors. The cool night air smelled exactly like freedom. I didn't look back as they dragged my legacy out in handcuffs. Patricia walked with the steady rhythm of a true survivor. The valet brought my old Lincoln Town car, built to survive a massive crash. I helped her into the passenger seat and got behind the wheel. I waited for her to break down, but tears didn't come. Instead, she pulled out a velvet box, holding flawless diamond earrings, the gift she meticulously saved 2 years to buy for Brittany. I'll keep these, she said practically, or sell them. I have always wanted a massive greenhouse. A greenhouse sounds absolutely perfect. I smiled. You were right, George. I am completely done hurting. I started the engine. Where to? The house? No, she said firmly. Do we still have our passports? Let's go to Italy tonight. I want to live. Italy it is, I said, accelerating onto the highway. That is my story. It wasn't the night we planned, but the one we desperately needed. You cannot buy true loyalty or teach respect to those who refuse to learn. Leaving the toxic battlefield is the best way to win. What would you have done? Let me know in the comments below. Remember, respect is earned, not inherited. We hopelessly cling to toxic relationships because they share our last name, foolishly believing they will eventually change. Real family aggressively protects you. Walking away is a brave act of self-preservation. Your personal dignity is the one crucial asset you must never liquidate. Subscribe to see who gets sweet justice next.